Chapter 63. The Dauntless. I mean, really, this is rather beneath you, Ambassador Cistern. Why did you not seek out your own invitation? Lady Tycanped asks him, and simply waves off her concern. Milady, I am not even a full ambassador, but merely the admiral of a singular fleet from a single world not yet sworn into the Galactic Senate. At best, I am a seat warmer. At worst, I am an annoyance. And while I do speak for all of humanity, there will no doubt be strife enough to signal my recall, and then I will be gone. Not to mention I've been forced to throw around an uncomfortable amount of political clout. Even were this posting not temporary in the extreme, I would be recalled for such a thing. Really? And your pushing for an alteration in arrangement space laws was not an overreach by the standards of your people? The peacock woman asks, as she daintily sips at a fancy alcoholic drink. Admiral Cistern was standing out a little oddly as he had sampled some of the table before visibly sighing in disappointment and departing from them entirely. The fare was adequate, but nothing that he could not find in a much more tasty form in his own mess hall. Nothing is salted, nothing is spiced or basted or fried or prepared in any way that enhances the taste. Even the cuts and purchases out of a common grocery store are more flavorful. It was a gross overreach, however. It was one that those upon Earth would find neither protest nor misunderstanding in my intent or actions. Simply put, anyone they could have sent would have done the same thing in my position. He says simply as he waits for Nikti to return. Apparently, something in one of the bits of finger food had tasted slightly off, and when she asked one of the serving staff how it was prepared, they had used something known as ring seed oil, something that she is mildly allergic to. She insisted he stay behind before marching out of the room. From what his ears could tell him, she had then broken into a flat run towards the nearest infirmary for her equivalent of penicillin or whatever medicine she requires, which left him to the mercy of Lady Tycanped and the gazes of the entire chamber. They were all paying very close attention to him, which made little sense as there was scarcely a woman here without her husband nearby. If not for the mind-bendingly massive medley of peoples here and the female guards, it would almost seem to be a formal affair on Earth, with poorly made food and questionable fashion sense. Lady Tycanped, for her part, appeared to be seeing if she could be the most gaudy being imaginable, with no less than 3 small-scale replicas of her own long tail feathers for her shoulders and neck. No doubt she thought it was regal, but it more closely resembled the end result of her plucking the feathers of another of her kind before wearing them as trophies. Though what the toddler-scale miscreants would have done to earn such displeasure is a mystery in of itself. Stepping out of that mental rabbit hole before he can be dragged further down, Admiral Cistern scans the room. It's a harmless enough pastime and always wise to know where all the security is, including his own whom stand at the sides of the large, open double doors. Agents Alpha and Omega were effectively anti-army. He cuts off his own train of thought. Mind readers were rare, but rare and non-existent are different things, and he is a prime target for their silliness. You have a pained expression, finally realizing exactly what sort of company you keep, Lady Tycanped asks him, and he shakes his head. No, merely remembering some unpleasantness. He says before he glances towards the entrances as Ambassador Tao walks back in with a much relieved look on her face. However things seem to be improving, Ambassador Tao appears to have made a full recovery. "Excuse me, milady," he says, nodding to her and walking away to rejoin his date. Really? What does he see in that tiny little cretin? Her entire race is nothing more than... He quickly finds himself too far away to understand the woman muttering under her breath any further, but he can tell she's still being a bitch by the way the hairs on the back of his neck are sticking up. Or possibly, he glances back to his bodyguards. Both of them are paying much more attention with a noticeably more practical grip on their ceremonial weapons. He picks up the pace to ensure that he's next to Ambassador Tao. "What's wrong?" she asks him. "Contact your guards. Something is up, and I'm fairly sure it's not the usual slander and rumor-mongering," he says, and her eyes widen for a moment before nodding. "Are you sure? If I'm wrong, then there's some truly malicious intent going around. I'm detecting something that's making the old animal instincts kick in." "Is that why the small hairs on your neck are slowly moving outwards?" she asks, as she casually adjusts her belt buckle ever so slightly. It gives off a single, near silent beep. Looking bigger can scare off predators. He notes as he scans the entire room. He can outright feel his heartbeat start to increase as he slightly kinks his legs and shifts his weight. Whatever's about to happen is coming closer and closer. A green pulse passes through the chamber, which draws some screams of shock, followed by numerous decorative plasma weapons detonating as, whatever the wave was, it compromises their internal integrity, which draws more shrill and panicked screams. "Calm down! A panic will just—" Admiral Cistern begins to shout before the nearby doors are forced open. "Rejoice, O people of the galaxy, for your—" The masked woman begins before the back of her head and chest detonate with a pair of resounding bangs. "Thank you, agents," Admiral Cistern says calmly. "How? The field is canceling out all energy containment axiom constructs. Those weapons should have exploded." One of the stupid terrorists' allies screams out in shock from just out of sight. "They don't use axiom, you twit. I suggest you use this time to flee before I send my bodyguards to drag you into an interrogation chair." Admiral Cistern scolds them. "I will give you till the count of 5. 1, 2. The sound of rapidly departing footsteps fills the hall. 3, 4, 5. "Gentlemen, fetch Sir Philip's next piece of entertainment, please." The agents race out of the hall at a fast jog that their conditioning will let them eat away at entire miles without axiom. With it? Dear God. He then pulls out his communicator from his breast pocket and quickly sends the video and audio it had been recording back to the Dauntless, with the instructions to find the idiots responsible and to get them to talk. He then tucks it back in, camera facing out as before as an impromptu body camera. "Lady Tycanped, I must admit this form of evening entertainment is rather crass. I do hope it was not something planned." Admiral Cistern says out loud, and his voice, unraised, echoes through the room. "No, there was an evening of music and dancing planned, not some cretinous scumbags attempting to attack us, or such a disgusting display of blood and violence followed by bloodlust." The elegant-looking avian scowls at him. "I'm uncertain how the whole of the galaxy does so, but it is military procedure to retaliate when attacked." Admiral Cistern returns lightly. "Regardless, however, does this mean that with our evening's unpleasantness that the charity ball is canceled? I do hope those trade bars I brought are put to good use and not simply lost." He notes, and the Speaker of the Council bristles in frustration before visibly calming down. "No, not at all. Just a quick changing of the guard to some more practical and less pleasant-looking equipped individuals. Although I am quite curious as to exactly how your own personal guard still had such frighteningly effective weaponry despite that erected field." "Chemically propelled kinetic weaponry, milady. Nothing heinous or complicated. My every crew member as well as I have been long trained in both the use and construction of such weaponry," Admiral Cistern states. "Now then, if the distractions are finished, perhaps we could get back to what we are actually here for." "And what are you here for?" "Why, the raising of funds for our charity cause these evening. Why are you here?" He replies, and there's a slight silence. "So if the music could please begin again so we can put the unpleasantness behind us?" "Are you mad? There is a dead body on the floor and—" Lady Tycanped begins before simply gesturing towards the body. And what? Will she be getting up to threaten us again? Have you refused to call cleaning for some reason? He asks, and she looks flabbergasted before turning away. Milady, they wanted to interfere with the charity. Therefore, if we cease in the celebration, then they've won. Put in that light, then you are correct, the ball must continue. To show fear to such cretins would embolden them further. Lady Tykenped remarks primly before clapping her hands together. Everything is quickly cleaned up and the music starts again in moments. New, silvered rather than gilded rifles are being brought around, and there's a slight buzz from Admiral Cistern's communicator. The only message there brings a smile to his face. The runner is being escorted to the Dauntless for questioning. Good news, Ambassador Nicti asks him. Yes, we're getting to the bottom of whomever set this up, he says, and she motions for him to follow her to the dance floor. He does. You do realize that it's likely the CEO of Orcs Industries, or maybe one of the higher-ups, she says softly to him as she turns and he unclips the sword from his belt. I'm aware. If the dance is canceled, the funds are all frozen for 6 months. If no one responsible for the attack is found, the case goes cold, and the funds are released to the last owner, which defaults to Orcs Industries in this case. 1/10 of all fundraising and charity events get disrupted in this way for the greedy to pocket the money. He agrees as he draws the weapon and holds it out in declaration to present the beginning of a dance as she grasps the scabbard. Which is why you were so insisted it continue, she says as he brings the sword to rest, and they both bow somewhat to each other. That and I get to cement a few reputations, extract a few favors, and give my more antsy and eager crew members something to do, which is worth twice the donation I offered, let me tell you that. He remarks as she takes a few steps backwards, and he takes one larger step while bringing the sword up to thrust. They step to the side and he flashes the blade out to stab, even as she leans back and away, an easy foot of clearance between her and the gleaming metal. Is there anything you haven't gotten figured out? She asks in a teasing tone while the dance causes her traditional jewelry to rattle as they take their long steps to the side. While they shuffle sideways, the movements of the dance instruct him to repeatedly move the sword from thrust to stab and back. Her dodges make the hand-carved chips of jade and decorated bone dance lightly against her dark green skin. A few things. No one can master everything after all, he remarks as she steps forward and he steps back while in guard before bringing the sword up to high. The music jumps a little and he brings the sword down to stab, a clear foot away from her as before, but with enough speed that the blade had flashed through the air. You seem to have mastered this dance well enough. She compliments him as she trades hands on the scabbard and begins guiding him in a circle, with him switching the sword between guard and stab 3 times as they make a complete rotation. There are 2 reasons for that, he says as she advances on him, and he brings the sword to rest and takes a few steps back. First, I had an excellent teacher, he says, and she fights down a blush. For all her flirting, she doesn't seem to have much idea how to handle being on the receiving end. Secondly, it's very similar to basic martial training, just set to the rhythm of music rather than anything practical. Sounds like the second is the more pertinent reason, she says primly, and he knows he got her even as the short dance starts truly picking up and he brings the sword to the high position.